I hope you enjoyed today's videos. I think it was a pretty good playlist. Seeing that dude get tapped up by the chick, man. I've been there, brother. I feel your pain. Anyway, for today's rant, I wanted to address something I saw a little bit this weekend from a couple of writers I respect a lot. Gino Morosco of MMA Mania and Fraser Coffin of BloodyElbow.com both said that the UFC ought to follow the model that the boxing promoters, HBO boxing promoters, followed in pushing the Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. versus Sergio Martinez fight, wherein they made no bones about the fact that JCC Jr. was a big underdog and that it would be a long shot for him to win. And it paid off in spades. We don't have the pay-per-view numbers, but from the web traffic, it was a big hit event. And the fight itself was a masterpiece, with Sergio Martinez methodically picking apart JCC Jr. through 11 rounds, only for JCC Jr. to come back and very nearly finish the fight in the 12th round, dropping Martinez twice in one of the most touching and exciting displays of heart I've seen in combat sports in quite a while. So fans will be clamoring for a rematch there, and I think this fight could put both men over as mainstream stars. Not quite at the Pacquiao-Mayweather level, but getting close. Anyway, the point that Fraser made was that the UFC ought to follow that model and openly admit that Vitor Belfort is no longer the phenom. In fact, he's a big, long shot. That this is more of a Rocky story than a phenom story as he takes on John Jones at UFC 152. Gino Morosco echoed Fraser's thoughts without the boxing. As much emphasis on the boxing promotion. But I want to point out one thing. The UFC no longer has a promotional vehicle. It's not the Spike days anymore, kids. Back in the day, UFC had all the slots they wanted on Spike. They wanted to run a countdown, it was on Spike. They wanted to run a prime time, it was on Spike. They wanted to feature John Jones on UFC Unleashed, it was on Spike. Spike, Spike, Spike. Spike had a lot of slots, and Spike's in a lot of homes, almost 100 million. FX is on a comparable number of homes. However, the UFC only has one tiny slot on FX, and that's on Friday nights for The Ultimate Fighter. So they're going to be able to, they advertised it last Friday pretty heavily, UFC 152 during The Ultimate Fighter's debut, and they're going to be advertising it again this Friday. But it's not the same because the prime time, the countdown is going to be on Fuel TV. Not at all the same. Fuel TV reaches almost nobody, about 35 million people, compared to FX's 100 million. And compared to the number of eyeballs and exposures they got on Spike, it's not even close. The UFC can market a lot to the hardcores that are reading about the UFC every day on the internet, but their options reading the casual fans, the people who make the difference between having a 200,000 sale pay-per-view and a 700,000 sale pay-per-view, are not online. They're not reading about the UFC every day. They're waiting to hear about it on cable TV, and the UFC needs to rejigger their deal with FX and Fox such that they get more exposure on the big networks. That's my rant for the day. We'll be back tomorrow with more MMA.